All right, cool. So this is just a short story. This is a story in several different parts. So I will read just part one tonight, and then we'll do part two and part three, and we'll talk more about it. Now tonight, we will have 7 parts. That's right. Yeah. So our mama is going to light the shamash candle, and then Hayden, as our firstborn.
That's a good question.
What is the shamash, Johnny?
That's the main candle.
It is the main or servant candle that serves the other one. Now Hayden, as our firstborn son, will take the shamash and light this one. And then Evan, tomorrow night, will light the next one. Are you ready, Hayden? I will say the blessing, and then we will light the candles, okay? Here we go. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has set us apart with his commandments, and in whose honor we kindle these Hanukkah lights, as you have commanded us to be lights to those around us. Go ahead, Hayden. And I'll keep reading. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who performed miracles for our forefathers in those days at this very time. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has granted us life and sustained us and enabled us to reach this occasion. Thank you very much, sir. Looking great. We don't want to accidentally light the second one. That happened to us last year, didn't it? Okay, so here I have the story, the first part of the story about why we celebrate Hanukkah. This history begins when Alexander the Great, the son of Philip of Macedonia, marched from Macedonia and attacked Darius, the king of Persia and Media. Alexander enlarged the Greek Empire by defeating Darius and seizing his throne. He fought many battles and captured fortified cities and put the kings of the area to death. As he advanced to the ends of the earth, he plundered many nations, and when he had conquered the world, he became proud and arrogant. What does it mean to be proud and arrogant?
Think you're special?
Think you are special, that's right. By building up a strong army, he dominated whole nations and their rulers and forced everyone to pay him taxes. When Alexander had been the emperor for 12 years, he became ill and realized that he was about to die. And he called together his top generals, noblemen who had been brought up with him since they were children, and he divided his empire, giving a part to each of them. After his death, the generals took control, and each had himself crowned king of his own territory. And the descendants of these kings ruled for many generations and brought a great deal of misery on the world. Now there was a wicked ruler named Antiochus Epiphanes, the son of King Antiochus III of Syria, and he was a descendant of one of Alexander's generals. Antiochus Epiphanes had been a hostage in Rome before he became the king of Syria in the year 137 before the birth of Yeshua the Messiah. At that time there appeared in the land of Israel a group of traitorous people of Israel who were not really people of Israel, they were traitors, who had no regard for the laws of our fathers and who had a bad influence on many of our people. They said, "Come on, let's come to terms with these Gentiles who are ruling over us. For our refusal to associate with them has brought us nothing but trouble." And this proposal appealed to many people, and some of them became so enthusiastic about it that they went to the king and received from him permission to follow the Gentile customs of the nations around them. They built in the city of Jerusalem a stadium like those in the Greek cities, and they had surgery performed on their wee-wees to hide the fact that they were circumcised. And they abandoned the holy covenant that God had made with them and started associating with Gentiles and did all sorts of evil things. Now when Antiochus the king had firmly established himself as the king in the whole area, he decided he wanted to conquer Egypt as well. and rule that country as well as Syria. And he invaded Egypt with a large fleet of ships, a powerful army, including many chariots and elephants and cavalry. And when
Elephants for battle.
battle elephants, man, don't you remember that in Lord of the Rings?
Just curious.
That's awesome. Now, when the attack came, King Ptolemy of Egypt turned and fled, and many of his soldiers were killed. Antiochus was able to capture the fortified cities of Egypt, and he plundered the whole land. In the year 143, after he had conquered Egypt, Antiochus marched with a great army against the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. In his arrogance, he entered the temple of our God and took away our golden altar, the lampstand, and all of its equipment, the table for the bread that was offered to Jehovah, the bowls and the cups. Oh, yeah, that happens occasionally. Oh, I did? I'm sorry, my eyes were... So he took away the bread offered to Jehovah, the cups and bowls, and the fire pans, and the curtain, and the crowns. And he also stripped all the gold from the front of the temple and carried off all the silver and gold of anything of value, including the treasures that were secret. Then he took it all to his own country. He had also murdered many people and boasted arrogantly about it. There was great crying out everywhere in the land of Israel. Rulers and leaders groaned in sorrow. Young men and young women grew weak. The beauty of our women faded. Every bridegroom who was about to get married instead sang a funeral song, and every bride sat crying in her room. All our people were clothed with shame, and our land trembled for them. Now 2 years later, Antiochus sent a large army from Mysia against the towns of Judea. When the soldiers entered Jerusalem, their commander spoke to the people, offering them terms of peace and saying, "Let's get along," but completely deceived them. Suddenly, he launched a fierce attack on the city, dealing it a major blow and killing many of the people. He plundered the city again and set the whole place on fire and tore down its buildings and walls. And he and his army took the women and the children as prisoners and seized all the cattle. And then Antiochus and his forces built high walls and strong towers in the area north of the temple and turned it into a fighting fort. They brought in a group of traitorous Jews and installed them there. They also brought in arms like swords and shields and javelins, spears and supplies, and stored it in the fort, all the loot that they had taken in the city of Jerusalem. And this fort became a great threat to the city. The fort was a threat to the temple, a constant evil menace for Israel. Innocent people were murdered all around the altar of our God. The holy place was defiled by murderers. The people of Jerusalem fled in fear, and the city became a colony of foreigners. Jerusalem was foreign to its own people, who had been forced to abandon the city. And the temple in Jerusalem was as empty as a wilderness, and her festivals were turned into days of crying. Her Sabbaths, joy of the Sabbath, was put to shame, and her honor became an object of ridicule. Her shame was as great as her former glory, and her pride was turned into the deepest mourning. Antiochus, the king, now issued a new decree that all of the nations in his empire should abandon their own laws and customs and worship and become one people. All of the Gentiles and even many of the Israelites agreed with this. They adopted this official pagan religion and offered sacrifices to foreign gods and no longer observed the Sabbath. The king also sent messengers with a decree to Jerusalem and all the towns of Judea, ordering the people to follow the customs that were foreign to their own country but were native to his country. He ordered them not to burn any offerings on the altar, no grain offerings or wine offerings in the temple, and commanded them to treat the Sabbaths and the festivals of our God as ordinary work days. They were even ordered to defile the temple and the holy things in it. They were commanded to build pagan altars, temples, and shrines, and to sacrifice pigs and other unclean animals there. They were not allowed to circumcise their sons, and were required to make themselves ritually unclean in every way they could, so that they would forget the law which Jehovah had given to Moses, that they would obey all of its commandments. And the penalty for disobeying the king was death. The king not only issued the same decree throughout his whole empire, but he also appointed officials to supervise the people and commanded each town in Judea to offer pagan sacrifices. Many of the Jews were ready to get rid of the laws of God and to obey these rulers from far off. They defiled the land with their evil, and their conduct forced all true Israelites to hide wherever they could. On the 15th day of the month of Kislev, in the year 145 before our Messiah was born, King Antiochus set up the awful horror, or the Abomination of Desolation, on the altar in the temple.
And there's 8 parts?
And pagan altars were built in the towns throughout Judea. Pagan sacrifices were offered in front of the houses and even in the streets. Any books of the laws of our God which were found were torn to pieces and burned with fire, and anyone who was caught with a copy of these books or who obeyed the laws of God was put to death by order of the king. And month after month these wicked people used their power against the Israelites caught in the towns. And on the 25th day of the month, these same evil people offered sacrifices on the pagan altar that was set up on top of the altar in the temple. Mothers who had allowed their babies to be circumcised were put to death by the king's decree, and their dead babies were hung around their necks, and their families and those who had circumcised them were also put to death. But many people in Israel firmly resisted the king's decree and refused to eat unclean food. They preferred to die rather than to break the holy covenant and eat unclean food, and many did die. In his anger, God made Israel suffer terribly. That was the first part of the story, setting the stage. It's not good. It's quite bad. Our land and our people get totally wiped out and are being...
It looks like that one's trying to melt down that one.
Yeah, that happens. They're just so close together. It's all right. That's why we bought tons and tons of candles. So, my wonderful children, we are not celebrating Hanukkah because of what has happened here so far. This is just setting the stage for what is great that is going to come after this. And our Messiah, Yeshua, he also celebrated the Feast of Lights. And he commanded us to be lights to the world. So what we do now is we will take our Hanukkah, our Hanukkah, which is this candle branch here, and we will set it in our front window with the window open so that the people outside can see our light coming from inside of our house and know that we are the people of God who follow his commandments. Are you ready? Thank you, Captain.
Want me to follow you?
Okay, here we go.
Let our light shine. This little light.
Oh no,
Is it going out?
this one went out.
Let the light go out.
It's okay. You opening it up?
Yeah.
Okay, he's getting it open.
You need help?
No, I don't.
He's got it.
Okay. I got it.
Here, I'll take that.
Okay, good job. You got it there, buddy?
Got it.
All right, pull it open.
Very cool.
Pull. Where's your muscles? Use your muscles.
Perfect.
There you go, perfect.
Let's see from
Okay, now
outside.
let's go outside and take a look from inside.
Gotta make sure everybody can see your light.
Gotta make sure our light is shining.
Wait.
Oh yeah,
Here it is, the Hanukkah
our
light.
lights are shining
And it goes
in the
with
midst
the
of the
song.
drum set.
The music of the world.
Music light to the world.
Good light to the world.
Cool. Well, you know what? Within 8 days, we'll have all 8 of them burning up there.
Beautiful.
Sweet, man.
The song that goes with that, you know.
Good
Yeah,
job.
no, that's all.